What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Fatboyz Dynasty Podcast, coming at you live on the YouTube channel, presented by the FantasyHolics Podcast Network. As always, I'm Bo. That is Brant. Brant, super excited for this wide receiver edition, and those of you tuning in with us live or watching it later will be able to see there's some much improved upgrades, a lot more better looking things on this screen to look at than the two ugly mugs that are the Fatboyz. So first and foremost, before we get too deep into the show, got to give the shout out to the behind the scenes crew that is making our ugly mugs much more tolerable to look at. Brant, definitely awesome tuning in, getting set up for a show when you have a background like this.
Yeah, absolutely. This is awesome background. The guys have been working hardcore in the back, Jay, getting us some new banners for our lives, for the wide receiver rankings here. It looks phenomenal, Jay. This is amazing. I don't look as fat. I feel like you got me looking a little slimmer in this box too. Maybe it's because of all the extra colors.
I will say I am a little offended that Luther Burden isn't on my side, being a Mizzou Tiger fan. But hey, we live and we learn. We'll move on from that, right, Brant? But no, last week we came at you with our top 10 running backs. It was only right we come in this week and do the top 10 wide receivers. We're getting awful darn close to the NFL draft. However, Brant, we did have some pretty big dominoes fall this week that I feel like we have to talk about here, even if just briefly on one of the two. I am excited about one of these moves. But we had Russell Wilson sign a one-year deal with the New York Giants. There was like a split second, even in the FantasyHolics chat, there was like a split second excitement about Jameis Winston being the potential starter there in New York. And then that kind of got dashed, it looks like, with this Russell Wilson deal. They paid him a lot of money. And then the one that I'm excited about is Stephon Diggs' contract with the New England Patriots, Brant. So your thoughts on those two moves real quick before we get into this?
Russell and Winston are going to compete for that spot. Winston's not going to take an easy backseat. He never has in his career. He says he's always going to fight for the position. So that should be an interesting camp battle, to actually say the least, because it was only a one-year deal for Russell, right? So it's a one-year deal for prove it. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of Giants camp there. I think both of them are going to be an upgrade from what there was last year for Malik Neighbors. So I do like the additions of both those QBs. And then the Diggs. I absolutely love the landing spot, love the spot. Get Drake May, a nice veteran receiver. I hate the fact Seattle didn't try to throw some money at him. That was my first words out of my mouth, the words we cannot say on here. Because I really did want to see Diggs in a Seahawks uniform, but it's a great landing spot for fantasy. I'm really excited to see what comes about this.
Yeah, and Superflex too. It should be exciting for Drake May because, man, you talk about a Patriots team that was really depleted for those pass catching weapons, an instant wide receiver one upside. Even if they draft a young stud wide receiver that we're going to potentially talk about today, I still think there's room for Diggs to eat in that system because, listen, even another talented wide receiver at worst puts Diggs at 2 on that roster. There are some players I like. Obviously, we haven't seen enough of Polk. We haven't seen enough of, Booty really in that system to see what it looks like, or in that offense to really see what it looks like. Obviously, we know that Vrabel's going to change some things up too. So that'll be, interesting to see how that pans out moving forward. But definitely a spot that they needed a wide receiver, and they inserted some talent right off the rip with Stephon Diggs, Brant.
Yeah, and he's going to command targets. He does everywhere. He wants the bulk of the targets. So maybe this is their way of saying, hey, we're going to draft a receiver, but it's going to be later in the draft. We're not going to go all out early in the draft adding one. They're going to add probably a guy later in the draft. This allows Polk to be moved into the slot a little bit more, I think. Hopefully he'll be able to thrive a little bit better this year than he was last year. This is more of my fandom coming out here. So I'm excited to see this moving forward. I do love this spot because he's going to command so many targets in that offense.
Okay. All right. So let's get into these top 10 wide receivers, Brant. I do think there's going to be, there was a little variation between the two of us on last week's show with the running back class, but really once we got into the top 3 or 4 names, it was pretty similar. I'm very excited to see where you and I differ this week, and I think I'm going to have some opinions that are going to be quite different from a lot of America here, really. I'll be interested to see how close you and I are, because usually we're pretty copacetic when it comes to our pre-draft rankings of things, but I think I may have shaken this up a little bit here, Brant. So you want to start from the bottom at 10 like we did last week and work up to number 1 with the one we're probably going to agree on the top 5, but let's go ahead and start at 10, Brant.
All right, I got Jalen Royals out of Utah State, 6 foot, 205 pounds. He ran a 4.42 40. One of the things I loved about him was his average yards after catch was 7.9. So this man's almost getting a first down after he makes the catch. And then he had 15 touchdowns in 2023, and he had 15.2 yards per catch in the last 2 yards were his average. So he's getting downfield, he's catching the ball, and then adding seven more yards. So this is an outstanding guy that I think will be a good yak guy, and for any team that picks him up.
Okay. Let me first ask Brant before I even unveil my guy at number 10 here. What would you say as a potential, like if you put yourself as a GM of let's say the Las Vegas Raiders, who are void of talent outside of Bowers there at tight end, need a wide receiver. What would you say if I told you there's a wide receiver who is going to be drafted later than a lot of the other names, but he averaged 25.4 yards per catch last season for an SEC school? Would there be any interest for you?
Absolutely. A deep threat is absolutely in the cards for them. I think they need to focus more on an X guy because, Bowers is going to move in there, but a field stretcher would definitely be a good play there.
What if I told you this field stretcher was 6'5", 215 pounds, that maybe could be more than a field stretcher, just wasn't used that way in school?
I mean, we should see. We shall see. It's Pete Carroll's system, so let's see.
This is Dante Thornton Jr. out of the University of Tennessee, Brant. I was kind of looking at it, and everybody made such a big deal out of Matthew Golden really flying up boards after his 4.29 40. Matthew Golden is 6 foot tall, 195 pounds. Dante Thornton Jr. is 20 pounds heavier than Matthew Golden and 5 inches taller, and ran a 100th of a second slower 40 time than him, Brant. This is electric for a guy of this size. Thornton was kind of a gadget guy in college. He did average 25.4 yards per catch, but he only had 26 receptions this year as a senior. So definitely makes you question why he's not on the field more with that raw size and that talent. I felt like those things were enough to make me put him inside my top 10 because I feel like the athleticism is there.
Okay. Absolutely. So my number 9 guy is going to get into I have 2 guys from this school, actually, and this is going to be the Iowa State, Jalen Noel at 5'11", 200 pounds, 4.39 40. He had 80 receptions for 1,094 yards and 8 touchdowns this past year. His drop rate has this is what stuck out to me as I was looking at some drop rates for some of these guys. I looked at a little bit of film, but this guy's drop rate decreased. He was 10% drop rate in 2022, 4.8 in 2024. So he's improving as he goes on. He's getting better hands. He's showing that he's willing to work at it. So this is a guy that I know a lot of people have had him coming up the draft board after the combine. This is a guy that he shows that he's willing to work on his negative takes, his weaknesses, as you would say.
Yeah, I do like me some Jalen Noel. I will talk about him as well here in a little bit, not to give any spoilers here. At my number 9, Brant, I have Isaiah Bond out of the University of Texas. This was a guy that was supposed to be one of the premier wide receivers this year. He did kind of get shadowed, especially down the stretch by Matthew Golden a little bit. 5'11", 180 pounds, so it's a little bit smaller frame. This would have scared me 4 or 5 years ago. I think we've kind of seen that mold get shaken, obviously, with like Devonta Smith, Wan'Dale Robinson, some of these smaller guys that have proven that they can, get in there, take some hits, bounce back, and still be productive. My big thing that I liked with Isaiah Bond, Brant, was that he didn't really have a drop-off going from Alabama to Texas. So learning that new system one year to the next, changing his quarterback from one year to the next, didn't really mess him up too bad. I think he's got skills that translate into the National Football League. And I really think what we've noticed here with Texas in the Steve Sarkisian era is that they're producing some darn good NFL talent. It obviously has happened last year, the year before in the NFL draft, and it's kind of something that's just we're starting to see more and more. I think Texas is churning out some pros at this point, so I think Isaiah Bond just has to be on the top 10 as well.
Okay, absolutely. He did not quite make mine. He was right there. I was going up and down. Do I put him in? Do I take him out? I was going up and down with him. I do like Isaiah Bond. I do think that he's a guy that, judging the landing spot in the draft, he could sneak into my top 10. But at number 8, I have Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. This is the second guy, 6'4", 215 pounds, 4.47 40. Has the most contested catches in FBS in the last 2 years, with a 55.6% catch rate on contested catches, only 3% drop rate over his entire college career. This guy can be an absolute electric X, a plug-and-play guy for the right school, the right team that drafts him. This is a guy that I could see becoming an instant top receiver on a team.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I will talk about him as well moving in. My number 8, I have Jack Beck out of the TCU, 6'2", 215 pounds, 4.55, 40 times, so a little slower, but again, nice frame. This guy had 62 receptions, 9 touchdowns for a pretty well-balanced TCU team this year, Brant. This is just another guy that he uses his size pretty well. I don't see him struggling with NFL corners too awful much. I think he's going to use his size. He has a really good box-out rate as well. So this is just another player that, again, I think we're starting to see this trend. You either have a really small, shifty, fast wide receiver, or we're getting back into the days of these big man-handling guys. And I think this year's draft class is kind of like to a T that, Brant. But Beck is another one for me. There's these guys in the bottom 7, 8, 9, 10 for me are going to be really landing spot dependent. But I could see Beck being somebody who, goes someplace and makes you do a double take. And let's also point out the fact that he was a transfer from wide receiver LSU, to TCU. So, if he was good enough to be put on that LSU team and see the field for them, which he did, that's good enough for me, Brant.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to add a few more things that I like from that guy here. Just a couple spots. I don't have him quite yet. I do have him a little bit higher than you, which also tells me the guy that we talked about prior to the show, I have extremely high to where he's not even on your list. But this next guy I have at number 7 is Trey Harris out of Ole Miss. I talked about him earlier this offseason as a guy that could make an impact. 6'3", 210 pounds, 4.5, 440. He's a true X receiver. He's a true big-bodied guy. He only played 29 snaps from the slot in 2024 out of the 214 total snaps. So he's showing you, I'm an outside guy. I'm probably not coming inside very often. 214 snaps. Like I said, he only played 29 of those from the slot. So this is going to be a true alpha outside. I don't want to say alpha, but he's going to be a true outside guy for most teams that draft him.
Mm-hmm. All right. I'm not going to get I'm just going to jump into mine here, Brent, because this is a player that I'm absolutely falling in love with. You've already talked about him. It is Jalen Noel out of the University of Iowa State. 5'11", 200 pounds, like you said, the 4.39 40. 80 receptions, Brant. This is a guy that when I think of route tree, like just dominance to get open, I think of Jalen Noel. And honestly, I don't know why I see so much of this, Brant, but I see early NFL Calvin Ridley when I watch Jalen Noel. And, from when he was in Atlanta, I drafted him way early in our home startup dynasty league. I was huge on Calvin Ridley. This is a guy that I think he could go to a spot and end up being a number 1 out of the slot and really, really taking home some value for fantasy here, Brant. I really like Jalen Noel. If he was about 20 pounds heavier or 10 pounds heavier and 2 inches taller, I could see him in my top 3, which is how he runs his route tree.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to jump right into number 6, guy you already talked about out of TCU, Jack Beck, 6'1", 214, 4.5 40. Here's what I'm going to add. 1.6% drop rate and 65% of his contested catches. So this guy's not just going to let you bully him out of the way. If he puts his hands on the ball, there's a good chance he's coming down with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll get no argument out of me on that one already. I've obviously talked about him. So here's one of my first shockers, Brant. Are you ready for this?
Yep.
Matthew Golden at number 6 for me. Outside of my top 5, yeah, he's fast. That's great. I don't buy into it. Okay. Listen, I was a doubter on Xavier Worthy, and Xavier Worthy had a nice season. I still think that's because of circumstances. Rashee Rice gone, Hollywood Brown not catching on, and getting hurt. There's so many things that happen to make Xavier Worthy what he was in fantasy. Next year, Rashee Rice comes back, is the number 1 target in my mind in that offense. They did re-sign Hollywood Brown. I think there's a chance you see a huge regression for Xavier Worthy next year, who, and we talked about last year, was kind of just a gadget guy who I think was, again, if you're a gadget guy going to that kind of a spot, that's the kind of spot you want to go to. However, listen, Matthew Golden wasn't in a lot of people's top 5 wide receivers until the combine, and he had a great combine. I'm not discrediting that. He made himself millions of dollars running that 40 time as fast as he did, Brant. I'm just personally not going to fall victim to it. I'd rather eat my words a year or 2 from now and say, hey, you know what? I was wrong on that young man. Hopefully he does have a great career. And, for your sake, Brant, I hope he's great, because I've seen a lot of Seattle linked to him. But at the same token, I just don't think he's done enough. I mean, his college production was good. The one thing I wrote down about him was the 17 yards per catch at the University of Texas. And I feel judged as hell with him sitting over here in the corner, pointing at me as I'm talking bad about him. But I just couldn't get that excited about him. I just couldn't do it, Brant. There's my first take.
Absolutely. And I'm not going to talk a whole lot about him, because when I bring him up in my rankings, it's 17 yards per catch was what I had down as one of the things I liked. His speed is why I do have him just a little bit higher. But really, with this wide receiver class, outside of, I think, probably 1, 2, and 3, that we're probably maybe even just 1 and 2, these receivers could really switch a whole lot come draft time, come more pro days. I think that there's going to be a lot of shakeup in this wide receiver class outside of your top 2. Most likely top 2 would be my guess. So my number 5 is the guy that I can't pronounce his name, but I'm going to give it one heck of a shot. I got the pronunciation right here. It's Alec Manor out of Stanford. I probably butchered it. I did the best I can. I'm a little proud of myself for even being able to read that. Not like that.
I'm proud of you for trying, buddy. I'm proud of you for trying.
6'2", 206 pounds, 4'4", 440. He's only 21 years old. This is why I kind of have him up here, because he is a young guy. He's going to get in. He had 6 touchdowns in both his years at Stanford. He's coming out as a sophomore. He believes in himself. He's trusting himself. The team that takes a shot on him is going to get a hard worker. Obviously, if he trusts himself coming out, or he knows something we don't, like next year's class is going to be phenomenal. So he's like, I better get out before them. But this is a guy that he really impressed me with some of his stats and where he was at Stanford. So this is a guy that I did put inside my top 5, and I'm betting on him too, man.
All right. At my number 5, I've got a guy you've already talked about. I got Trey Harris out of Ole Miss. I've seen some guys in the fantasy industry, Brant, that I trust a lot, that think this guy could be the number 1 in this class, which is interesting to me. I don't quite see that when I watch the film. But what I do see when I look at Trey Harris is bully ball, Brant. I was impressed by his hands, how he uses his hands, when he's fighting for that contested pass. Trey Harris, I think, man, you almost think back, Brant, to not so distant memory when, 2 Pro Bowl level wide receivers that are currently in the NFL were in Ole Miss in DK Metcalf and AJ Brown. I see some similarities in those two's game to what I see with Trey Harris. Again, I don't have a whole lot to say outside of bully ball with him. I just think this is the type of dominant end zone-esque, contested catch wide receiver that this class really represents to me. And I just think this is another guy that he could step into a spot and be the number 1 on somebody's NFL roster.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just going to say number 4, I got Matthew Golden. You've already hit everything that I have written down for him. A speedy guy that can get you some yards. I do like him. Like I said, there could be a lot of fluctuation as it comes down to draft time. But yeah, I got Matthew Golden as number 4.
Okay. At my number 4, I'm ready to plant another flag here, Brant. I'm just must be feeling myself a little bit tonight, but I've got Jaden Higgins at Iowa State. You mentioned him already, so I won't waste the time. This guy's an alpha. There's not much else you can say about this, Brant. This guy is going to go into the league. I would not be shocked if 3 years from now we sit back and look at this class and Jaden Higgins end up being the number 1 wide receiver in this class altogether. I just think the tape's good, the speed's good, the size is there. Like you said, the contested catch rate is phenomenal. And Brant, I wrote alpha next to his name. When I watched his tape, when I looked at his numbers, that's the one thing that really stood out for me. And this is on a team where at the collegiate level, we're talking about a guy that I also have in the top 10 from his teammate having 80 receptions this year. And even when you're watching the Jalen Noel highlights, there's a lot of Jaden Higgins to pick up. He blocks well, uses his size. He is an all-around wide receiver. There's going to be NFL teams salivating about him. I would not be shocked at all, Brant, if we don't see some of the NFL teams prioritize him. And not to mention, Ted McMillan and Luther Burden and some of these guys that you and I are going to talk about, because I think our top 3 is going to be very similar. I think there's the one thing that Jaden Higgins is going to have over them is he's probably going to go to a better landing spot year 1 as far as a more established coach, a more established quarterback. And so for that reason, I think Jaden Higgins, like I said, I'd love to revisit this, a year or 2 from now and just discuss who the guy is out of this class, Brant, because I think it's going to be Jaden Higgins. I really do.
Absolutely. It's a guy that I've watched some of his film. I've watched some of his tape. I've seen his blocking ability. This is a guy that I wouldn't mind linked to Seattle prior to the Cooper Kupp signing. I thought maybe we would try to get him, but I think he may be off the board before we're ready to draft a wide receiver in this year's draft. At number 3, I have Emeka Egbuka, 6'1", 202 pounds, 4.3 40, 10 touchdowns in 2 of his 4 seasons. And think about all the wide receivers there in Ohio State, and you're able to put down 10 touchdowns in 2 of your 4 years. That's very, that's very eye-opening to me. He's a guy that's trustful in the red zone. So I absolutely do like this guy. I think that this is going to be a guy that some NFL team is going to get, and they're going to fall in love with some of his route running ability and his hands. And Ohio State has been putting out some good wide receivers as of late.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, Brant. You talk about this Ohio State team, because I do have Emeka at 3 for myself as well. So we might have the top 3 just the same here, actually. I have Emeka at my 3rd spot as well. And what stood out to me is that he pulled 81 receptions down for Ohio State Buckeyes this year in a team where everybody is salivating over Jeremiah Smith, right? Everybody was talking about freshman Jeremiah Smith, as they should. Phenom, stud, going to be one of those generational talents we talk about whenever he's ready to come out to this draft. And Emeka Egbuka was able to pull down 81 receptions. And let's not kid ourselves here, Brant. I think Ohio State is giving LSU a run for its money, at least in the recent years, with wide receivers that we've put out. I mean, you talk about Marvin Harrison, who underperformed a little bit last year, JSN, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, the list goes on. And this is a school that I think is really on the map for wide receivers right now. And I just think Emeka Egbuka is going to be the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. My number 2, I have Luther Burden out of your Mizzou Tigers, 5'11", 208 pounds, 4'4", 140. This is where I wanted to get out. This is where I started looking at drop rates and everything else, because I really wanted to get something that most people may have not heard about them or seen about them. 4.5% drop rate in college. This is the other thing I wanted to add. He added 34 rushing attempts in college. So he's able to come out of the backfield, use the wide receiver handoffs. This is a guy that absolutely could be electric, could be a Deebo Samuel-esque type player.
Yeah, this is a Deebo on steroids. I think Luther Burden, obviously the offensive prowess at Mizzou took a step back this year. Witnessed that firsthand and was very disappointed in that. Everybody was saying this was the year for Mizzou football, and it could have been. But I get off that soapbox. Luther Burden, if he would have came out after the 2023 collegiate season, he would have been a top 3 wide receiver in that draft as well. Came back this year, and the offense just kind of regressed a little bit, which was kind of disappointing for him, Brant. But yeah, for his versatility, excuse me, is what I have written down for him. And yes, you're absolutely right. I watching Mizzou games, but I also went and looked at the numbers afterwards. He added 2 rushing touchdowns this year. On his ball in his hands is something NFL teams are going to look to do. This is a guy who's going to get drafted, and he's going to be an instant day one alpha, unless he goes into a place where one of our current top 10, NFL wide receivers are already sitting, which we do know that does happen from time to time. But yeah, I absolutely love Luther Burden. I would have loved to have made an argument for him to be the number 1 in this year's class, but I obviously couldn't put him over the guy you and I are getting ready to talk about.
Yeah, so at number 1, we got Ted McMillan, 6'5", 212 pounds, 4.55 40. And in his 3 years of college, he dropped the ball 9 times. That's it. He's great at 50-50 balls. He dropped the ball 9 times in college.
Yeah, Brant, there's not a whole lot to add to this, really. There isn't. The one thing I will say is it feels criminal for somebody to be 6'5", to weigh 212 pounds, and move as fluidly as he does. His cuts are insane. His route running, just everything he does is just smooth. It's almost like watching a graceful ballerina. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just everything he does has a purpose, Brant, and that purpose is to be a nasty, vicious, make the defender look as bad as possible wide receiver. And man, NFL corners are going to struggle with this guy. I can't wait for the day we get a Tet McMillan, Sauce Gardner matchup, or a Tet McMillan, Derek Stingley matchup. There's going to be some matchups in the NFL with this guy that are just going to be, amazing. But again, at 6'5", to be as fluid as he is with his movements, Brant, it feels unhuman almost. It's just unlike anything we've seen. And I don't want to, necessarily make this comp necessarily. But the last wide receiver I can feel like I watched and felt that way about was Calvin Johnson. So, it's just, listen, that's steep praise. And I'm not trying to hype that on Tet McMillan at this point, but that's definitely something that I feel is there. Tyler, I see your question. I want to pull this up on the screen, Brant, and just see your thoughts on this. Tyler asked, how early are you taking one of the rookie wide receivers in redraft leagues?
Ted, I'm probably talking first 2 rounds, especially if you're doing it pre-draft. I want to see where he goes. I think he's going to wind up at a Vegas, and I'll definitely solidify that. The first 24 picks, I'm probably pulling Ted. I think this is going to be a guy. So I wanted to add one more thing about, well, you go ahead and finish. You go ahead and answer that question.
Yeah, so
I'll add one more thing about Ted.
So what I want to say first is in a redraft league that is not associated with Dynasty, I'm not taking probably any of these guys in the first 2 rounds. 3rd, 4th rounds where I'm kind of looking landing spot, depending, obviously, that if you see, Tet go to Green Bay or something like that, I could see myself moving up on that. But in true redraft leagues, I don't know if I'm there on this class just yet to take in the top 24 picks. When you talk about some of the stud running backs that are there, some of the stud wide receivers that are there, dynasty startup, I could see that conversation changing for me, because obviously you're moving guys, that older generation of Tyreek Hills and Devonta Adams, a little lower on your list in dynasty. But in redraft, I just don't know if I'm there yet with this class. Landing spots are going to be a big deal for me on that, obviously. But I'm just curious, or I'm just a little hesitant, I guess, to say that I'm there with this class first. So, Brant, I want you to go back to Tet, but while you do that, Tyler, you tell me where you're comfortable with taking these wide receivers. I'd love to see.
Yeah, so I did misunderstand. I thought it was a startup and a redraft. I still think I'm comfortable into 2nd round, early 3rd round with Tet. Landing spot dependent. I am still comfortable in that spot, just not in the first 2 rounds. In my mind, I heard startup, but it was redraft. I went and double checked it. With Tet, this is a guy that I felt us in the Midwest, I'm going to say, is not going to shock anybody that watches late college football. This is the 10 o'clock guy that was on the ESPN as you're laying down or you're relaxing from a long day of college football. This was the only game left on. This is a guy I fell in love with watching the last 2 years. It actually kept me awake watching this guy. If you have not watched film or seen Tet McMillan play, go back and watch. This guy is just electric, and he's so much fun to watch too. He made me stay up late constantly watching these games until 11:30 midnight our time, just because he is that electric and that fun to watch.
I'm sure Tet McMillan would be super ecstatic to know that you were laying in bed thinking about him, watching him. So
absolutely
glad we got that out.
Got to turn it that way.
It'd be really interesting, and I want to put you on the spot here, Brant, if you will.
Cheetos.
What's your thoughts on potentially doing a week or two early mock draft next week, where the two of us actually mock some of these rookies and see where we're at on them? Just a rookie mock. Do one now and then do one a couple weeks after the actual NFL draft. See how they change. What's your thoughts?
I'd be interested in doing that. Maybe we can grab a couple extra guys to get on with us, even if they don't want to show their beautiful mugs like we do, just to join us in a draft. I'd be intrigued by that. So yeah, we definitely could do that next week. A little rookie mock, 2-round rookie mock draft.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to dive into some tape here.
Real quick, Jimmy did say watch Tet versus Travis Hunter for the overtime winner. I want to say, too, Brant and I both left Travis Hunter off our top 10s, not because he's not super talented, because we don't know what he's going into the NFL as. If I knew 100% he was playing both sides of the ball, that would have put him in there. But NFL teams could do screwy things. Let's wait and see where he goes. Obviously, Travis Hunter could be a name that really changes, things. And I know, Jimmy, you were talking more about that when I was talking about the Tet versus some of these, premier cornerbacks versus, just standalone, comparing the two of them. But I do think if Travis Hunter ends up, getting drafted and the team says, hey, we're going to absolutely use this guy on offense, that changes things dramatically for sure. So that is something we'll have to revisit at some point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I know he was linked to the Patriots for a while, and adding Diggs, does that solidify that if they do draft him, he's only going to play one side of the ball? It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Travis Hunter. Definitely will probably be the talk of the night as don't forget, we will be live day one of the NFL draft, and that will probably be one of our main topics that we would love to discuss with fans and anyone else that's wanting to join us. We would love to talk about, the Travis Hunter and some of these landing spots on that day one of the draft. I'm super excited. I'm ready to get to the draft. I'm ready to start diving into this season a little deeper and get the ball rolling here.
Yep, absolutely. So I think that does it for this week's episode, guys. Be looking for next week where we come out and do that mock draft. Jump in and tell us where you think Brant and I mess up, or where you would have taken a player, or what value picks we get there. So be looking for that next Wednesday.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining in, guys. Jay, once again, phenomenal layouts here. We'll definitely get with you to get one for the mock draft too. You do a great job. We appreciate it. And as always, stay hungry.
Stay fat, my friends.